Imagine waking up one morning to find that the world is still running, but the rules have been deleted. The stores are open, but the shelves are empty. Banks exist, but the money in your hand feels like paper, a memory of something that once had meaning. Jobs vanish overnight, yet everyone keeps moving, pretending not to notice. The ground has disappeared from beneath their feet. Think of that moment, not as a story from a book, but as an approaching crossroads, a place we are moving toward in real time. What if I told you that the system that shaped our entire world is on the verge of an irreversible collapse, not because of a bomb or a war or a single disaster, but because of the quiet weight of its own promises, the ones it could never keep? It's a collapse happening silently, day by day, in the space between what we are told to want and what we truly need. We are going to look at why this is not only possible, but perhaps inevitable. And the most important reason is not about money or politics. It is about us, about human nature itself. We call this system capitalism. At its core, the idea was simple: competition, invention, and owning your own work. And it did fuel incredible things. We have medicine, technology, and buildings that touch the sky. But hidden just beneath the shiny surface is a problem, a paradox that has worried thinkers for centuries. The system, as it grows stronger, erodes the very ground it stands on. To understand this, we have to look back. Adam Smith is often called the father of this system. He had a beautiful idea about an invisible hand. He believed that when everyone chases their own self-interest, this invisible force would guide the world toward prosperity for all, a kind of magic. But even Smith, the man who dreamed it up, gave a warning. He worried that an unchecked chase for wealth could lead to moral decay, that it could lead people to exploit one another. Fast forward to today. That invisible hand is trembling. It's trembling under the weight of an imbalance that is hard to look at directly. Over the last few decades, the rich have become richer, not slowly, but at a speed that breaks the mind. A recent report on world inequality showed that the wealthiest 10% of people now own over 76% of all the world's wealth. At the same time, half of the world's population survives on less than $6 a day. Is this freedom, or is it a beautiful cage, gilded for a few, while most of us scramble for the crumbs that fall to the floor? Think about that. How can a system call itself fair when billionaires exist in the same world as starving children? How long can that imbalance hold before it tears everything apart? History has a quiet lesson for us here. No system lasts forever. Feudalism ruled Europe for hundreds of years, and people thought it would never end. It ended. The Roman Empire was the most powerful economic and military force on earth. It crumbled from the inside out. In every case, the collapse did not happen all at once. It was gradual, a slow detachment where the system became more and more disconnected from the needs of its people. And now, we are seeing the same symptoms again. Wages stay the same while the work gets harder. People work longer hours for less security, feeling less fulfilled. The middle class, which was once the engine of these economies, is slowly vanishing. And still, we are told to believe in the dream, that if we just try a little harder, sacrifice a little more, we can make it. But what happens when the dream itself is rigged? There's a deep psychological game being played, one that goes far beyond money. It's about what the system does to our minds. Thinkers like Erich Fromm saw this coming a long time ago. He argued that modern capitalism makes us feel alienated, not just from our jobs, but from our true selves. We start to see ourselves as commodities, as products to be bought and sold. Our value isn't in who we are, but in what we can produce or what we can afford to buy. Our identity gets shaped by brands. The result is a world filled with a quiet, humming anxiety, a deep loneliness, even when we are surrounded by people, a feeling of despair that we can't quite name. That feeling, that your worth is measured by your output, is not an accident. It is the psychological consequence of a system that has put profit above purpose. And this isn't just a theory. The signs are everywhere. The housing market feels like a ticking time bomb. An entire generation is shackled by student debt. The climate crisis, driven by a need for endless growth on a planet with limited resources, threatens our survival. Maybe the most telling sign of all is the loss of faith. Trust in our institutions, from governments to corporations, is at an all-time low. When a system no longer serves the majority, when its promises become lies we tell ourselves at night to sleep better, collapse isn't just possible, it's inevitable. But why don't we just stop? Why is it so hard to let go of something that causes so much pain? Because it's more than just an economic system now. It has become a psychological one. Sigmund Freud wrote about our unconscious drives, the hidden currents that guide our behavior. His own nephew, a man named Edward Bernays, took those ideas and used them to build the foundation of modern advertising. Bernays understood a simple, powerful truth. To sell a product, you don't sell what it does. You sell what it means. You attach it to a deep human emotion. A car isn't just a way to get to work, it's a symbol of power and freedom. A perfume isn't just a scent, it's a symbol of love. A brand is no longer just a product, it has become a piece of your identity. Suddenly, buying things is no longer just a choice, it's a ritual. The marketplace becomes the mirror where we try to see ourselves. This is the genius of the system, and it is the trap. It doesn't force you, it seduces you. It links buying with happiness, productivity with being a good person, and wealth with being morally superior. But what does it cost us? The system needs you to be dissatisfied. It needs you to feel like you are not quite enough, so you will keep chasing, keep spending, keep upgrading. The moment you feel content with what you have, you stop feeding the machine. So, contentment is rebranded as laziness. Simplicity is mocked as failure. And rest is seen as a weakness. The psychologist Carl Jung spoke of a shadow inside all of us, the parts of ourselves we don't want to look at. This system exploits that shadow. It tells you, don't look inside. Don't sit with your discomfort. Just buy something. Achieve something else. Distract yourself. But the ache never really goes away, does it? Because the void we are trying to fill isn't a material one, it's a spiritual one. And that void is growing. Young people today face levels of anxiety and depression never seen before in history. Why? They have more entertainment, more freedom, more connection than any generation before them. It is because a life built only on external things is a fragile life. When our sense of worth is tied to the market, any failure feels like a crisis of our very identity. We are no longer human beings. We are human resources. And it's getting worse. The gig economy, hustle culture, these are not signs of freedom. They are signs of desperation, a system pushing people to become their own brand, their own corporation. But what happens when being your own boss just means you can never turn off the clock? This is the system's greatest trick. Not just to control us from the outside, but to colonize our minds, to make us believe that our failures are personal, not a result of the system. If you are unhappy, it's because you're lazy. If you're broke, it's because you didn't work hard enough. If you are exhausted, it's because you're not managing your time well. We blame ourselves, not the culture. But what if none of that is true? What if the system is designed to exhaust you, to keep you on a treadmill that goes nowhere? Distracted enough to not rebel, but dissatisfied enough to keep buying things. So it's time we ask a dangerous question. What would it mean to stop running? We have been told it's easier to imagine the end of the world in a ball of fire than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. Think about that for a moment. Why is a system that isn't working for most of us so hard to let go of? Because it has become our identity, our culture, for some, even a religion. But beliefs can change. What if the collapse isn't the end of the story? What if it's the end of the first chapter? What if it is not a fall into chaos, but a call for us to evolve? This isn't about just building a better economy. It's about building a better world. A world that is not driven by the fear of scarcity, but by the practice of cooperation. A world where our value is not measured by our bank account, but by our well-being. This isn't some impossible dream. It might just be the natural next step in human evolution. But to get there, we have to face the myths we've been taught to ignore. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of world are we really building, and what kind of world do we want to leave behind? The collapse is not a question of if, but when. The real question is, will we be ready? Because every great collapse in history has carried inside it the seeds of something new. When feudalism started to decay, it made way for the Enlightenment, for new ideas about democracy and human rights. When ancient empires crumbled, they left behind blueprints that future civilizations learned from. The fall of this system, if it comes, will not be the end of human progress. It may be the start of something more aligned with our true nature. You don't have to look far back to see how this works. The Great Depression in the 20th century showed just how fragile this system can be. But out of that crisis came big changes, things like the New Deal, new rights for workers, and a focus on taking care of people in society. When people demanded change, the system was forced to bend, or it would have broken completely. We are living in a similar time of reckoning now, but the stakes are much higher. This time, the planet itself is at risk. The engine of capitalism demands endless growth, more production, more consumption, forever. But we live on a planet with finite resources. You can't have infinite growth on a finite world. The two ideas are fundamentally at war with each other, and the result of that war is the collapse of our ecosystem. What happens when the system that runs our economy is also destroying our home? More and more people are starting to ask this question, and they are building something new. You don't fight an old reality by yelling at it. You make it obsolete by building a better model. So what could that look like? Some are exploring a universal basic income, a way to make sure everyone can survive in a world where machines are taking more and more jobs. Others are building worker cooperatives, where the companies are owned and run by the people who actually do the work. And then there is the biggest shift of all, redefining what value even means. For centuries, we have measured the value of everything in money. A forest is seen as more valuable cut down for lumber than it is alive and breathing. A person is seen as more valuable when they are productive than when they are at peace. But what if we started to measure other things? What if we measured well-being, connection, empathy? What if the success of a country was judged not by its GDP, but by the happiness and health of its people? This isn't a naive fantasy. The country of Bhutan already uses a metric called gross national happiness. Cities around the world are experimenting with new ideas like community-owned land and local currencies that keep wealth inside a neighborhood. These are not perfect solutions, but they are steps, they are pieces of a new story. Because at the heart of this whole problem is not just economics, it is mythology. The system survives because we believe in its myths. The myth that endless competition is just human nature. The myth that greed is necessary. But these are not truths, they are just stories, and stories can be changed. For most of human history, societies were not run by markets. They were run by ideas of reciprocity and mutual aid. We are not hardwired to be selfish. We are hardwired for connection, for meaning, for cooperation. So the collapse of the system is not just about things failing, it's about myths dying. And when myths die, people wake up. We begin to ask questions that were once unthinkable. What does it truly mean to live a good life? What is wealth if not love and joy and belonging? So, what now? We've looked at the cracks in the walls. We've questioned the story we've been told. But none of that means anything if it doesn't touch the way we live our lives day to day. Because real change doesn't begin in parliaments or boardrooms. It begins in our hearts, in our homes, in quiet acts of defiance, in the radical decision to simply live differently. You may be asking, what can one person possibly do in the face of all this? I think that's the wrong question. The real question is, what are we willing to stop pretending we don't know? We know that overconsumption is hurting the planet, yet we fill our carts. We know that debt is a trap, yet we chase higher credit limits. We know the 40-hour workweek leaves us exhausted and numb, yet we wear our busyness as a badge of honor. But the gift of a collapse is that it strips away illusions. It forces us to face what we have been avoiding. It opens up a space, a terrifying but sacred space, where something new can be born. Practically, what does that look like? It might mean slowing down, not because you've earned a rest, but because rest is your birthright. It might mean choosing to be present over being productive. It might mean learning to live with a little less, only to discover that in simplicity, there is a different kind of abundance. It might mean growing some of your own food or supporting local farmers, sharing your skills with a neighbor, offering care without expecting anything in return, saying no to the systems that ask you to be less human, even when it's hard. It might mean facing your own internal capitalism, that little voice in your head that says you are only valuable when you are producing, the voice that says you must constantly prove your right to exist, because the revolution begins inside. We dismantle the system not just with protests, but with presence, with relationships that are not based on what we can get from each other, with communities built on solidarity, not status. Think of the old fairy tales. They often begin with a kingdom in chaos, a ruler lost to greed, a spell cast over the land. But there is always a moment of awakening, a breaking of the curse. What if we are living in that moment right now? What if the spell is breaking? Not all at once, but piece by piece. What if this pain we feel is not the end, but the labor pains of something more beautiful being born? We are not helpless. We are not alone, and we are not broken. We are just waking up. But waking up is not comfortable. It means grieving the life we were told we were supposed to want. It means letting go of an identity that was shaped by the marketplace. It means sitting in the uncomfortable space of the unknown. That is the sacred space we live in now. The space between stories. The old story, the story of conquest and competition, is nearing its final chapter. The next story, well, that's up to us. Will we write a story of respect for the earth? Will we build systems where no one is seen as disposable, where wealth is not hoarded by a few, but circulated among many, where success is measured not by how much we have, but by how deeply we connect? Will we remember that we are not machines, but living souls in fragile, miraculous bodies, all walking on the same ground? This collapse, if it comes, will be not just a fall, but a flight, a shedding of everything that is false. Yes, capitalism may collapse, perhaps it must, but in its place something astonishing can rise, not overnight, not without pain, but through intention, through courage, through the quiet rebellion of people who choose to live differently. So let us no longer ask, will the system collapse? Let us ask, what will we build when it does? And let us begin now, because the most powerful system in the world is not capitalism, it's the human heart, awakened,